So I recently brought some major changes to my Patreon campaign and my YouTube channel, things that I have wanted to implement for a very long time. I had been kind of, solidly locked into the groove of creating the riff videos, one type of video with heavily scripted and edited narration. And I just was feeling for the longest time like I wanted to bring more of myself and more of the other things that I enjoy doing to YouTube. Didn't know how to do it. Took the big leap this year and brought the art to the channel in the form of sketchy and a couple of videos talking about art and process and all that kind of fun stuff. And I'm going to keep doing that. I was really concerned about how I was going to, just the technical aspect of capturing drawing. And then I think I've hit upon something with just capturing my iPad screen and then narrating a time lapse of it after the fact, where I've been able to pump out almost daily videos of drawing. So I hope you're enjoying those. I know it's not for everybody. I've certainly taken a bit of a hit in subscribers and patrons. So if you're catching any of this content and you're enjoying what you're seeing, I would really appreciate at least a subscription and a share and a like. If not, some kind of support on Patreon, where you can get exclusive and early videos and stuff like that. Channel membership, which I've now added, where you can see some of the videos ahead of time, and also some material that had been exclusive to Patreon before, which I'm now doling out there for members as well. So that out of the way, what is happening in this video is another big thing that I'm a little nervous about. Art is such a huge part of my life that not sharing it online, not talking about it, not bringing it to this channel was something that was eating away at me and bothering me. There's something else that I'm very, very interested in, about which I have a lot to say, but it's a weird mix. All right, the riffing fans are already weirded out by the art, and now people who are maybe grooving on the art might be like, video games? Why does Josh want to talk about video games? Video games are a surprise midlife passion for me, and that's one of the things I just want to quickly talk about in this video before I get to some specific video game content in another video or series of videos. I just wanted to have a quick chat and just broach the topic here and say, is it okay if I talk about video games on my channel? And I wanted to talk a little bit about the perspective I bring to video games, why it's weird, and why maybe it could sort of be interesting if I talk about video games, or possibly not. Because there are so many voices already on YouTube talking about video games. And as I'll explain in a moment, my journey to video games only really started very recently. So I have found YouTube to be especially helpful in having people talk about types of games that are available, approaches to games, history of games, all that kind of stuff. I have found YouTube in particular to be indispensable as far as making sense of the enormous universe of video games. My interest in the hobby has snowballed in the last couple of years to the point where it is definitely excessive. I go big on hobbies. I was a Lego guy for about 5 years, up until fairly recently, and it's just the expense and the clutter. Lego is a cool hobby, and when adults realize that there's a lot of Lego that caters to us, it can really become an exciting hobby. And it was for me until I filled my basement of my home with plastic and I began to gather dust. So I've found that video games, they're also pricey. It's an expensive hobby, but it's a lot easier to accumulate video games inconspicuously and not fill your house with too much clutter. My history with video games is that I hardly have one at all. That's the unique and weird thing about my perspective, is that I didn't really grow up with video games. I was aware of them. I'm a child of the 80s and 90s, and my friends had Super Nintendos. Actually, my friends had Nintendos, NES, Super Mario Brothers, and Duck Hunt. That was the extent of my exposure to Nintendo back in the day, going to a sleepover and playing Duck Hunt for 20 minutes. And then I had a PC. I had an IBM PC Junior, and I learned how to code, and I played Jumpman and a few things. But by and large, console gaming completely passed me by. It just wasn't going to happen in my household. It wasn't. I was intrigued by it, partly as an extension of my interest in art and animation and all things, particularly digital things, but it just wasn't accessible to me. And I didn't own a video game console until I was in college, when I bought a PlayStation 1. And I have owned every PlayStation console up until now, when I do own a PlayStation 5. But that doesn't mean that I was some big Sony gamer. I always, especially from the PS3 on, I have primarily used my PlayStation devices as streaming and movie watching devices. You know, PS3 was the best Blu-ray player at the time, and now the PS5 is the best 4K player that you can get. And that's I say that from experience. Before I could get a PS5, I had a couple standalone 4K players, and they just were not dependable. They were buggy. They would freeze. They would freeze at the same spot in different movies, and then when you buy another copy of the movie, they would freeze at the same spot. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic. So I mainly, when I did play video games, it was always on a Sony PlayStation. It would be, and I would stick to safe titles like Crash Bandicoot, and then the Jak and Daxter games, and eventually Resistance and Ratchet and Clank. So anything by Naughty Dog and Insomniac games, I would play all of those things. So that's the closest thing I have to video game nostalgia, is being a 20-something and playing the, whatever the mainstream mascot games were for Sony at the time. I was too weirded out and afraid and not interested enough to push my way into some of the weirder areas. I didn't play a lot of Japanese games. I never caught up with Nintendo. And I didn't go into some of the weirder or more interesting genres, because I just didn't have time. I didn't think it was for me. I had more passionate interests elsewhere. Fast forward to 2019, and I got a Nintendo Switch. Now, I didn't know a global pandemic was approaching, but so that wasn't part of the inception of this whole thing, but it certainly ended up exacerbating it and intensifying what would happen in the last few years since I got that Nintendo Switch in 2019, and caught up on Nintendo titles, caught up on just gaming in general, discovered indie games, and really became quickly passionate about video games. And I have to say, what initially pushed me over the edge was the Switch hardware in particular, was the idea of a handheld video game. That's what I was always interested in. I should mention, I also did have a Sony PSP, and I only had a handful of games for it. I'll do a video sometime about that, because I still, to this day, I would say that the PSP holds up incredibly well. So many interesting entries in great franchises, and so many unique games released for that platform. But the Switch is what unlocked all of this, with just catching up with Nintendo games and all the different genres, and then with how easy it is to accumulate indie games in the eShop on the Nintendo Switch. I just went down the rabbit hole and kept going, and I haven't looked back. I now, today, own multiple devices. I have a Switch, I have a Steam Deck, I have Anbernic handhelds from China, I have an Ion Odin, an Android-based gaming device, and I own hundreds and hundreds of indie games and ROMs, and I have caught up. I've been doing my homework over the last 3 years of catching up on video games, and it's out of control, and mostly it's just a personal, private diversion. I mean, I do share it with my daughter. She has a Switch of her own, and we don't always like the same games, and she hates a lot of the games that I like, but I try to make it a family thing, and I try to at least keep up and at least feign interest in Pokemon so that I can find out what she's playing and what she's enjoying. So that's the quick version of how I got where I am today. And I want to talk more in depth about my experiences catching up on games. I want to talk about emulation. I want to talk about that Steam Deck, although I don't want to become a YouTube Steam Deck guy. There are so many of them. I got a Steam Deck. There's just so many of these thumbnails of the guy 3 months in. Do I still love my Steam Deck? Yeah, bro. Yeah, we get it. The Steam Deck is cool. I'm more interested in what you can do with these devices than with just talking about devices and bragging that you have them. The Steam Deck is remarkable because it is a way to access PC games which have been inaccessible to me. I always have a PC that's just barely strong enough, able enough to create the videos that I have to create. That's like, I'm always, pushing the limits of what my old PC can do. I've never had a PC that could play games well. So the Steam Deck represents my entry point into PC games. Switch introduced me to Nintendo console, non-Sony console games, and then indie games. And then I started to get into, I baby stepped my way into emulation with some of those Chinese handhelds where you could play old Nintendo SNES and Genesis games and things like that. Emulation then opens up to me, and then now PC gaming has opened up, and my goodness, I can hardly keep up. And I find myself knee deep in games. I have the weirdest habits of playing 5 or 6 games at the same time. If I get interested in a genre, I will just obtain as many games as I can in that genre. I'll start playing them, and then the ones I like will rise to the top. And I'm currently playing like 4 different isometric ARPGs, CRPGs. I'm so confused by the terminology. I mean, I get it, but I don't know why it has to be so obtuse. Maybe I'll talk about that. I have to do something with all of this knowledge and all this accumulated stuff and all these opinions. The other thing that colors all of this is that I am a 40-year-old dad with a lot of responsibilities, with a kid and a mortgage and all that stuff. And so gaming time is precious to me. I do not have nostalgia, and why I think that's significant to my perspective on video games is that so much of the video game discourse on YouTube is people who have been gaming since they were a little kid, and they've picked their allegiance to a company or a device or whatever it is, and then they're just kind of fighting from that corner. And I really, yes, I've owned every Sony platform, but I wouldn't say that that's my favorite, especially now that I've tasted all of these goodies from all over. I really don't feel an allegiance to any particular company or device, and the technology now allows for such a diverse experience of all types of video games. So I'm playing, in the same evening, I'll be playing a first-party Nintendo game, dip into an indie game, and then over on the Steam Deck and play some kind of a big, PC RPG or something like that. So I really feel like my perspective is a little bit unique in that way, where I don't have any pre-existing allegiances. I'm interested in what games are good, how to make sense of the stifling, paralyzing level of choice that we have. People's choice was usually limited by what they could afford to get, how many people could use. There were usually like 3 or 4 competing consoles. You could only afford one as a kid, and then you'd be limited to the games for that console that you were interested in. Today, between your PC and all these different handheld devices and different consoles, it's reasonable that if you're an adult with expendable income and an interest in video games, that you have almost unlimited choice of where you want to go. And I, in just a few short years, have wound up in a place where I am knee deep in all of these different types of games. I want to try and sort through it. I want to be helpful with my recommendations. I want to talk about some of the things that I find curious. And again, all of this is apart from nostalgia or allegiance to any particular brand. And so I don't know if this is interesting enough to you to want to keep watching information like this. I think it will get better as I talk about specific games, and I have another video in the works as I record this one where I just want to talk about my favorite games of this year. I'm going to do another video where I talk about my experience with emulation and rediscovering, decades of video games that I never played when they came out, and what that's like as a newcomer and as an adult, and make some recommendations in that track as well. This is just to test the waters and to come out here and say hello. This is a passionate interest of mine, and I'd like to start talking about it on camera. YouTube is oversaturated with video game guys, so I don't want to just throw myself on the pile. I don't have cool graphics yet. If this works, if you want to hear about this, I'll pay more attention to these videos and I'll see where it goes. I'm just testing the waters. I'm so grateful for any attention, any of the time you choose to spend with me here. I will be gauging the response to this video. And the next one, I'm producing another one. I'm not waiting to find out if I should. I'm going to do my top games of 2022, which kind of highlights how eclectic my interests in gaming have become so quickly here, and then we'll see where it goes from there. I'm very nervous about this. I don't know if this is going to take or work. I'd like it to. That's enough for now. Thank you for your time. I look forward to gauging the response of this video, to hearing from you. You can support everything I do over on Patreon, or you can become a member of the channel here. You can like, subscribe, all that good stuff. I already said that in the beginning. I'm saying it again. I'm getting greedy. I'm so sorry. Thanks so much. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.